Okay, good. Oh, Neil, can you turn on your volume? That's great. So welcome to those in attendance at the remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. You're also reminded to note that we may have members of the public and press observing today's meeting proceedings. Can I ask that all those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off throughout? Can members of a local review body leave their cameras on but mute their microphone when not speaking? As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the meeting during the course of consideration of any of the reviews. This meeting has been convened in one response to one case due to a non-determination of the application and also 2 requests for review of the decision taken by the appointed officer under the council scheme of delegation. This meeting will now ask. Where's this? Members of the local review body have there before them copies of the reviewed documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. We'll now ask Mr McBain, the Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedure to be followed in the conduct of these reviews and take a roll call of all members present.
Thank you, Convener. Members have the procedure note which is circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. The first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. The regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. The focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. The circumstances in which additional matters can be taken into account are set out in the legislation and will be addressed by the LRB's advisors where relevant. The review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. If you can just please indicate that you're present for the recording. So, Councillor McRae?
Present.
Councillor Blake?
Present.
Councillor Copeland?
Present.
Councillor MacDonald?
Present.
And Councillor Van Sweden?
Present.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. So turning to consideration of the first case in respect of the non-determination of the application for change of use and reconstruction of existing commercial garages to form triple domestic garage with upper floor store and external staircase at 36 Albion Place, Aberdeen, planning reference 241416. We will now hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Mrs. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal as well as the policies to be considered when determining the application. I would point out Ms Green's attendance today to provide her with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the earlier consideration of any of the applications under review. Ms Green will not, however, be able to express any views or merits on the proposed development, and in effect her role will be a neutral one involving provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms Green, over to yourself.
Thank you, Convener, and morning members. I'll just share my screen with my presentation. Okay, so as noted, this is a request for review against non-determination of the application for change of use and reconstruction of existing commercial garages to form a triple domestic garage with upper floor storage and external stair access at 36 Albion Place. And the reviews have been submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit. The applicant has indicated that there are no new matters raised.
Apologies, Ms Green. I'm getting a lot of auxiliary noise. I don't know if anybody else is, and it's not terrible, but it would be good if we could sort it now, Convener.
I'll try without my earphones and see if that's better.
Much better.
Better. Right. I need new earphones, obviously. Hopefully there won't be background noise then, because I think there was a bit last time. I'll continue like this, but let me know if there is more background noise. Right. Okay, so there were no new matters included in the submissions, and in terms of procedure, the applicant expressed the view that the review could proceed without site visit, although in later submissions they suggest that a site visit might be of benefit. So I will provide some background information on the cases before handing back to the convener for members to discuss the case and decide how to proceed. So this is the existing and proposed site location plans. And you can see the site outlined in red. Those are the existing 2 garages that are subject of this application, and then same site outlined in red with the proposal there. And you can see also outlined in blue the other land owned by the applicant. So the plot of 36 Albine Place, the rear garden area of 35, and then these 2 commercial parking areas that surround the site off Albine Lane. And also to note that the 2 Albine Place buildings are category C listed. And there is also a listed building consent in for the same proposed works to the garages, the same works proposed under this application, and that's subject to appeal as well. So this is a site plan which I've just put on its side because to fit it on the slide a bit better. Obviously north is this way, Albine Place here. And you can see the garages as proposed there, the triple domestic garage with the rear external stair. And they're separated from 35 and 36 Albine Place by the commercial car parks, but were previously part of the few of those 2 houses. So this is from Google Maps. It's 36 Albine Place there, with the garages here on Albine Lane. And I've got a closer up shot there. Since this is just from Google, since the time this was taken, the roof's been removed from the garage at number 35 as it was unsafe. And you can see the boundary walls to the fuse, the former fuse, and this one extends between the 2 garage buildings, which is referenced in the submissions and the report. And a 3D image, obviously the roof's gone in this one, so the 2 garages there and the rear of the properties on Albine Place. And then a photograph taken from the applicant's agent's submissions. And this is comparing the proposed floor plan for the triple garage with the existing 2 garages. So you can see that they propose to use the existing walls around these 3 sides, and then the frontage would be built new. And this is the external stairs here, and the existing garages that are shown here. So in elevation from the lane, the existing view of the garage, the 2 garages, this is the site boundary here. And then the proposed triple garage. This is just for context, showing the building next to it. And it indicates the ridge heights as 38.3 metres above ordnance datum at the moment, and 38.77 as proposed. which means that the existing height is 5.66 metres with the proposed maximum height of 6.2 metres. And that's the garage as existing, noting the various materials of rendered brick, some granite to the lane elevation, and then the proposed elevation to the lane. So there's the slate roof, reclaimed granite to the south elevation. And these are the other elevations. So the north elevation facing into the car parks, the existing elevation there, and then as proposed, which would be a wet dash. You can see that the stairs, the external stairs, come up to a dormer type construction clad in timber to get access to the upper floor storage. And that's shown on the two side elevations. So that's the existing elevation of the garage. You're just seeing a building beyond that. And then, as proposed, the slate roof and the timber clad access to the upper level from the rear. And the other side elevation as proposed and as existing. And that's the existing site plan of the two garages. And then as proposed, the two levels, storage at first floor level and then the ground floor with the three spaces. It's indicating there an electric vehicle charging point. So the proposed footprint is the same as existing, 11.1 metres long and 7.8 metres wide. There would be 72 metres square of garages and 40 square metres of storage. And as I said, the existing brickwork and render wall to the garages are sought to be retained, and the frontage would be new, with the timber clad access to the storage area at the back. And those are some cross sections. So the site lies within the Albine Place and Ruberslough Conservation Area. This is the conservation area in the orangey colour, and the garages are just there. So the key determining factors in the draft report of handling, which is in the agenda, those are stated as the use of the garages in terms of the change from commercial to domestic, the impact of the reconstruction works on the historic fabric of the existing garages and the boundary wall that's in between them, the scale, form and design of the proposal and the impact on the surrounding conservation area, as well as any the listed buildings at Albine Place. And the conclusion in the report is that the proposal is unacceptable due to it being remote and independent from the residential curtilage, which would conflict with policy VC6, which is the zoning policy to the area, that it would conflict with the householder guide as the buildings are not within the curtilage of the domestic property that they relate to, that the scale and form would have an impact on the historic environment, including the conservation area, and also they're within the few of listed buildings, that there would be the removal of the historic boundary wall between the garages, which conflicts with policies on historic assets, that there's a question over the reconstruction and to what extent existing walls would require to be rebuilt, which wouldn't consist of reuse in accordance with Policy 9, but it might require demolition and rebuilding. That there's a conflict with the design and historic environment policies, as well as the Aberdeen planning guidance, which I'll go through. And also that the proposal would result in overall 9 parking spaces being provided for the property at 36 Albine Place. And that includes spaces at the front of the property on Albine Place, as well as the 3 in the garage, which would exceed parking standards and also conflict with policies on parking, sustainable travel in NPF 4 and the local development plan. So also to note, there were no objections from the Roads DM team and there were no comments from the Community Council, which is Queen's Cross and Harlaw. So I'll move on to the applicant's statement of review and response to the report. They state that the original building on Albine Place had been used as a residence for most of its life, and it now has permission to be used in residential use again. It's unknown when the land to the rear was separated, but it was post 1942. They note that the applicant owns the car parks and the garden of number 35, number 35 being a vacant office building, and they seek to use the garage in association with residential use of number 36. So the garage at number 36 is shown on the 1923 map, whereas there's none at number 35, and the garages have both been altered over the years. They note the history of the site with a number of applications, including coming to LRB and the timeline of communications with the case officer. They state that there were no objections from neighbours or consultees. They submitted records of crimes and antisocial behaviour in the area for over the last 2 years. They state that the applicant wishes to bring historic buildings back into use, including the main building as well as the garages, and also that there are a wide variety of modern and traditional buildings and the lanes nearby, both commercial and residential. It's pointed out that the proposal would marginally increase the roof pitch, which wouldn't be perceptible, and also the height would increase marginally but still be lower than the neighbouring building. They point out that the proposal would include an EV charger in terms of sustainability and emissions reductions, and also that there's nothing to prevent the garage being separate from the house in terms of not being on the same plot. Some further points from the applicant's response to the report. In terms of the listed description, it doesn't mention the garages. In reference to the conservation area appraisal report for the Albine and Ruberslow conservation area, it describes changes in back garden areas and rear lane developments of coach houses or new buildings, which include mews houses with dormers on the lanes. It's pointed out that the proposal includes a slate roof with use of reclaimed granite and wet dash, that the buildings are currently poor condition and have many later additions. They state that the proposal would be in keeping with the lane and there would be no impact on the character of the listed house, that it would bring derelict buildings back into use. And in terms of policy D7, which is granite buildings, point out that the garages have been altered over time and that they have little significance, historic significance. So they describe how the proposal would meet the 6 tests within design policy, and those include providing safe and secure parking and high quality design in response to the context. It's stated that the majority of the view wall, this is the wall between number 36 and number 35, so the majority of that would be retained along its length, with only the short unseen length between the 2 garages being removed. And it's further stated that many boundary walls in the area have been removed, with examples given. And then there are photographs of buildings in Albine Lane, which are in the agenda. So at that point, I will hand back to you, convener, for members to decide how to proceed.
That's great. Thank you very much. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, reminder, if you do not feel you have sufficient information to take a decision, you can request that further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. We'll quickly go around the room. So at the moment, I'm happy to proceed, but will Councillor MacDonald?
Me too.
Thank you very much. Councillor Van Sweden?
Happy to proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Copeland?
Happy to proceed.
Thank you. And Councillor Blake?
Happy to proceed.
Thank you. Therefore, all members are happy to proceed. So we'll pass back to Ms Green on the relevant policies and considerations for this review.
Thanks. So these are the relevant policies from NPF 4, the National Planning Framework, which forms part of the development plan. So policies 1 and 2, as we know, relate to tackling the climate and nature crises and mitigation, and they're relevant to every proposal, with decisions should be taken through the lens of those policies, whilst recognising that some are of a scale that don't make a significant impact. Policy 3 on biodiversity seeks enhancement of biodiversity for all proposals in relation to the scale. And Policy 9 seeks the reuse of existing land and buildings, with demolition as the least preferred option. And I'll cover the other policies on the following slides. So Policy 7 relates to historic assets and places, and states that proposals for the reuse of listed buildings will be supported only where they preserve the character and special architectural or historic interest. And the policies, relevant policies from the local development plan, are these: design policy D1, which I'll cover on a slide in a moment; policy D6, which seeks to preserve the character of conservation areas and the fabric and character of listed buildings and their settings; policy D7 I'll cover in a moment. Policy T2 encourages development being in locations where it's accessible by active travel and public transport. And then parking policy I'll cover in a moment. And policy V6 is the zoning policy, so I'll just cover that in a moment as well as the planning guidance notes. So policy VC6, which covers the West End, it encourages the principle of change of use from office to residential being supported. And it just states that all proposals must respect the special historic and architectural character of the West End. So in terms of retaining granite heritage, this policy is relevant, and it just states that the council seeks to retain granite buildings and would only allow for them to be demolished where there's evidence that that every effort's been made to retain them, they're no longer of special character and incapable of repair. And it could be demonstrated that the demolition is essential to delivering significant benefits, or that repair and reuse are not economically viable. So there's just setting within the context of that policy. And where the tests for demolition are met, the visible reuse of salvaged features is required. So this is the planning guidance for development along lanes, and it has a whole list of a design checklist, which I've just picked out a couple of points in there. So proposals should respect the built environment context by incorporating original boundary walls where they exist, or reinstating them through new development where they've been lost. And the other relevant point was that proposals should be no more than 2 domestic stories in height and be equal or less than 5.6 metres to the ridge line in order to maintain traditional domestic height and scale. And this is from the Householder Guide, which is referred to in the reports, where a second story is to be accommodated within a pitched roof space. Outbuildings should retain the impression of being single story in height, with dormers not being permitted as a means of gaining additional headroom. The second bullet point is access to an upper floor should be situated internally. Also, outbuildings should not have a negative impact on the character of the surrounding area. And finally, where highly visible, and especially in conservation areas, detached garages should be of a scale and design that reflects the prevalent context of the surrounding area. So just turning to parking policy, which encourages low or no car development in inner city areas, and points out that development should comply with the standards in the transport and accessibility guidance. And that would provide for 3 parking spaces for a house of 4 beds or more. And it encourages low car development within conservation areas. So just having a look at policy D1 from the local development plan and also policy 14 from NPF4. They both encourage high standards of design with a strong and distinctive sense of place as a result of context appraisal. And they each have the 6 qualities of successful places, stating that where proposals don't comply with those 6 qualities, they won't be supported. And those are being distinctive in terms of their scale, built form, sense of place and design, sustainable, pleasant, healthy, which includes reactivating derelict and brownfield land, connected and also adaptable, which mentions flexibility for changing needs. So overall, a reminder of decisions being taken in accordance with policies from the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and also being decided on their merits. And the basis for the decision in this case, the key considerations were the use of the garages being separate from the residence, the impact of the reconstruction on the historic fabric of the buildings, the scale, form and design of the proposal and the impact on the surrounding area, which is a conservation area, and the level of parking. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole or other material considerations indicating otherwise? And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Convener. Can I ask, first of all, how many beds there are in number 36, Outbound Place? Is that known?
I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, I didn't
just say it's more than 4.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. And I'm not very averse with electric vehicle charging points, but I assume that the charging point would be able to service all 3 bays in that garage. It wouldn't just be for the one car where that charging point was.
I mean, it looked as if it was to one side, whether that...
It's not hugely material to my thinking.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I guess it could be moved between 2 of the spaces, or yeah, it
okay. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to understand a little bit more about the process of engagement with the applicant and/or their agent. There was quite a lot in the pack about emails going backwards and forwards and so on. And is it? Am I right in thinking that there wasn't much introductory chat or correspondence or pre thought went into the application before it maybe went in? Did I pick that up correctly?
I mean, I can only comment to a limited extent on that. There wasn't a formal pre-app inquiry. That's probably all I can say in terms of that, other than what's in the submissions.
Okay, thank you. And I did have one question outlined in my annotations, which I will just go to right away. So there is. I was confused when I read the reports on page 62. There was reference to the planning department somehow want to use bureaucracy to leave the building with a commercial use. But reading the rest of it, I thought that the whole purpose was to go domestic. Would that be the case? It is for domestic use, the garages.
Yes, the application is for a change of use for the garages to be used for domestic use. Yeah, rather than existing commercial use in connection with the car parks.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, convener. Will the external staircase be visible from the lane, or will it be just visible from the car parks?
I mean, it would look as if only the edge of it, very edge of it, would be visible. It's to the rear, okay. So unless it was visible in an oblique view, it wouldn't be visible to very visible.
Okay. And so the garage will be within the boundary of the property. It's just you're not considering it to be in the boundary of the residential property because there's a commercial car park which they own between the garage and the garden. Is that correct?
I mean, there's a separation. Planning would really disregard land ownership as in terms of the uses.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The residential use would be separate because it would end at the north end of the car park of the commercial car parks, so they would be separate from the residential use.
Okay, so it's irrelevant that they own the commercial property because obviously that was what was shown on the map, that they own that commercial car park in between, but that's irrelevant to the decision around the garage.
I mean, it's a separate matter. Okay. I mean, it could only be relevant if it was you wanted to see whether an applicant could achieve something in terms of the planning proposal, but it's considered separately. So we would be looking at the two uses. That's what the report's really referring to.
Okay, and in the back, and so obviously there had been some communication. Has there been any discussion about reducing the height? Because obviously that was one of the things that was pulled up around the design.
Well, I can only really comment on what's been submitted, but it would appear that the point was made by the case officer. I'm not sure how the timing of that related to the submission of the review, but
okay. And do we know if there's any intention, because obviously you've pointed out around the parking, the number of spaces, has there been any information to indicate what they intend to do with the front? Is by building the garage there an intention to reduce the amount of parking at the front, for example, returning it to garden?
There was nothing in the submissions that I saw indicating that.
Thank you very much. Just a question from myself. the applicant also provides a number of pictures of other garages within the lanes that have been converted, but our information that's been provided sort of talks about the can't think of the words at the top of my head here, but I'm just wondering how close in proximity are these other sort of garage conversions within relation to this specific property? As I think we have approved a couple of the past through various LRBs, so just looking to see how close proximity we are to other conversions that have taken place.
We would be close to other garages within the lanes. I can show you on Google Street View or the 3D version if you like.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I just couldn't remember, are there going to be two accesses into there on either side of the proposed development? Like an ingress and an egress, or maybe once we've had a look at the Google, we can maybe go back to the site plan, Ms. Green.
Yes, the garage would be entered directly from the lane. The entrance and egress are for the commercial car parks, so they would just remain as existing under this proposal. And the garage would just be directly from the lane. So yeah, those are the garages. You can go down to Street View if that's... That's the application site. Let's go the other way. So there's a variety of buildings and garages off the lane.
So just tying back in with Councillor MacDonald's question there, there'll be the wall will continue right the way up to the back of the garage. There won't be people won't be able to come off from 35, loop round and come back out the property of 36. I think that's where you're heading with that one, Councillor MacDonald.
Yes, it was, and I also wanted to ask the question, convener, about the building that is the one that's similar in height to the proposed garage. That's not a garage, though, is it? It's a dwelling. Would I be right in thinking?
Yes, that's correct.
Just different compared to the planning guidance that you went through about garages rather than just dwellings.
That guidance, development along lanes, would cover different types of development along the lanes, which could include conversion of coach houses to dwellings. It's all development in lanes, not just garages, that would be relevant to that in that guidance.
Which I accept, but is it material that when you actually develop something into 2 stories, and it's for a dwelling that people would live in, is different from putting 2 stories where it would just be a storage space in a garage? Would that be a planning consideration, really?
Yes, it would be relevant whether it's a house or a garage, but both the householder and the development along lanes guidance do allow for 2 stories. It's just that they seek for those to be kept down to a height that's subservient to buildings on the main streets.
Thank you.
Does this plan, is that one you meant in terms of?
And so that boundary wall will remain from the garages.
This boundary wall is the one referred to that would remain up to the back wall of the garages, and then the section that would be demolished would be between the garages. So that would remain. It's outside the site, but that section as well. And obviously these boundary walls as well. So the section they're talking about was between the garages.
Thank you.
Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Lucy, can you go back to the overhead pictures of the site, please?
That one.
Yeah, could you, we've got another one which is at sort of lower level. The reason I'm asking is this parking space to the right. On the other picture that you showed, it looks like there's an access from this property into there. Could you maybe pull the picture? There is another picture that showed there was an access there. Yeah, yeah, I think it's that one. Is that an open space there between the?
Here.
No, go up there and turn right. Between the trees, is there an open space there that gives access to this car park?
Oh, in there.
Yeah.
Or
is there another access to that car park?
I think there's another access. Let me just go on to Google itself.
Is you sure there's a picture, a different picture? I looked as though that was open.
Not sure. I don't think it's open. The boundary wall is all the way along, but
yeah, there it is. Is that a?
Yeah, sorry, that.
Yeah, that looks like it's got an access out there.
I think that's a wall.
There is a wall there, okay.
Yeah, because they would go in through there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just wanting to double check. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, members? Not seeing any hands. Okay, so in accordance to the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. So we turn to determination, members. At the moment, with what's been proposed, looking at the supportive response from the applicant as well as the pictures of the providing garages at the moment, I'm minded to overturn, but I'd be keen to hear what others are thinking on this. So open floor to anyone who wants to come in.
Sorry to interrupt, sorry, just because this is a non-determination, we wouldn't be overturning it. You'll either be approving or refusing. Perfect. So just to confirm, you would like to approve?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There we go, thank you. So therefore, I'll be looking to approve. Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I would tend to go the other way, I'm afraid. I'm not convinced that this is the right scale and design that is required for this area. I don't know if I've got support for that, but we can go into the detail of it later if you like.
Mrs. McBain, just a clarification regarding how we sort of determine this one. Do we need to seek seconders and then go away and discuss?
No, it'll just be the same as is a review, but we'll just approve our reviews. But if you both want to give reasons, or all members can just give reasons for their decision, and then we'll see what the majority go with.
That's perfect. Thank you very much for clarification. Councillor Van Sweden.
Yeah, I would be supporting you, Councillor McRae, in this. I think that we should convert, the building should be converted to the proposal. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Copeland.
I tend to agree with yourself, convener. I think bringing premises back into domestic use is got to be a bonus. We don't want empty offices sitting all over the place. So if somebody's making use of a building and turn it into residential, I think that can only be a bonus for the whole area.
Okay, Councillor Blake.
Thank you, convener. I would also support you on this. I think it is bringing a brownfield site back into use, and I think it will be in keeping with the lane and the multiple different types of buildings along there.
Thank you very much. In relation to policies, I think in terms of policy VC6 West End area, I think we're getting a bit of feedback. Councillor Copeland. There we go. Yeah, so in terms of policies, I think policy VC6 in terms of West End area, I think this encourages a mixed use, including residential, and supports the change of use of offices residential. I think the proposal complements this policy by repurposing the garage to support the residential use of the main villa. I think in policy 7, historic assets and places, the reconstruction respects the historic environment by retaining and reusing of the original materials as outlined by the applicant, ensuring the new structures in keeping with the surrounding area. And in terms of policy 9, in terms of brownfield development, it promotes the reuse of existing buildings, reduces the need of further sort of greenfield development in areas, and proposes revitalises a neglected site, contributing to sustainability of the area. I'm also happy that the development will provide secure parking and EV charging points, addressing safety concerns and supporting the transition to net zero. And I feel that the careful design and use of materials ensure that the new garage will enhance the character of the lanes without detracting from the historic value of the main villa. Councillor MacDonald, do you want to bring anything forward on that?
A lot of what you said, convener, I would actually agree with. There are some good reasons for determining that this go ahead, but I do feel myself that the scale of having a three-car garage on that location is over. Is too much. It conflicts. The design itself is okay. I'm unsure about the outside stairs. I think if we have a policy that says it should be internal, I would tend to hope that could have been designed in to what was there, and I just think that on balance I think this could have been looked at again and come and used this site, but used it with a better design, a more in keeping design with a historic environment, and that more consideration was given to the nature of the area in Albion Lane, which we know has developed in different ways over time, but there are times just to get it right, and I think this could have been tweaked and bettered to not have a garage there, but in the shape and form and size that it is at the moment. So that's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Van Sweden.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I would add is actually something Councillor MacDonald brought up earlier on, that there are actually there's EV charging on both of the outside walls, as opposed to just one of them, with the intention that obviously eventually we'll all be going towards electric car travel, and that should be in place perhaps from the offset. I would also like to see the upper floor actually used to live in rather than to store, but I wouldn't sort of press on that. But I think the EV storage is quite important.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sweden. Obviously, we're not discussing the livability of that upstairs. We're only discussing the storage on this application. If they want to come in back and change that, they'd have to bring that forward in a future change of use. Therefore, by majority, we are agreeing this application, or is that correct? Thank you very much. Members, we now need to decide if we have any further specific required conditions on this. I'll bring back in Ms. Green again to discuss anything.
Thank you. I don't think there are any conditions. In terms of the EV charging, I'd just say that the policy and guidance would only require one charging point per residence. So I think it would be difficult to condition more than one charging point. And the materials are outlined on the proposal, so I don't think there's anything else that I would suggest.
Thank you very much. I take in relation to Councillor Van Sweden's point on further charging, that would be up to the applicant to install if they do feel so that they require that in future needs. Okay, therefore, members, we have taken decision on that one. Please note that decision notice from today's meeting will be issued to applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. So turning in to consideration of the second review in respect of a decision to refuse the application for a change of use from short-term let accommodation with maximum occupancy of 4 people at attic floor flat 320 Great Western Road, Aberdeen, applying a reference 240651. We'll again pass back to Ms. Lucy Green, who will take us through a description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reason why the application was refused. Back to you, Ms. Green.
Thank you. Just share my presentation. Okay, so as noted, this was a request for review against refusal of an application under delegated powers. And the applicant indicated on the notice of review that there are new matters raised in the review submissions consisting of suggestions. But having reviewed those, I think that they are further discussion of matters that had been under discussion previously, so I wouldn't say that they do count as new matters in terms of the LRB. In terms of the procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that it may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll carry on and provide some background before handing back to members. So this is the location plan showing the site of the attic floor flat here on the corner of Forest Avenue. And the application is retrospective for use as a short-term let with a minimum duration of two nights, no maximum stay, and it would operate on a permanent basis as a short-term let, and waste would be from on-street communal bins. So this is the property fronting onto Great Western Road. You can see it there, and the entrance to the short-term let would be along this path, which I will just show on the next slide. So that would be the entrance into 320, and the flats up here on the attic floor. Once through the entrance door, there's a communal hall and stairs to the flat on the first floor, as well as the attic floor flat. And that's just showing it within the conservation area. The floor plan of the flat And this is, the stairs come up here to the doorway into the flat just here. And then these face towards the front. And these towards the rear garden. So it has an overall floor area of 93 square metres, with a living room, kitchen, bathroom and 2 bedrooms. There are no other flats accessed from the same landing, but from the same stairs on the floor below. The other flat is in mainstream residential use. There's no parking provided, and the flat has access to the rear garden. It's been in use for 2 years as a short-term let. And there are a few photographs in the submissions. That's just one of them. And the living room. And then the rear garden. So the reasons for the decision were that there would be an adverse impact on the amenity of the flat below, which shares an entrance, hall and stairs, due to the sharing of space with transient and changing visitors and cleaners, all of whom would be unknown. The open nature of the vestibule and the close proximity of the private entrances would result in adverse impact, with a real and perceived impact on privacy and security, and there could be more noise disturbance compared to a residential use, and that the proposal was therefore contrary to policies on residential areas, design, amenity, and policy 14 on design and NPF 4. In terms of the location, that was considered acceptable with local economic benefits and accessibility from the city centre. But it was found that the impact on residential amenity would outweigh the benefits, and that it was therefore contrary to policy 30 on tourism. So for the applicant, the following points were made. They submitted a copy of the welcome note, which provides house guidelines to people staying. The current occupier of the flat below has had no complaint about the use of the flat for a short-term let over the last 2 years, and didn't object to the application. They cite positive reviews on Airbnb and a listing which is targeted at families and couples. They describe how the property is professionally managed by family who have been involved in the hospitality industry for many years. They state that given the description of the area, it's difficult to see how the proposal would impact on the amenity of the area, and how that impact would outweigh local economic benefits. They sent a copy of the Chief Planner's letter, which is the one that makes clear that the local development plan, because it was adopted later, would outweigh NPF 4 policies where there's incompatibility. And the applicant considers that there is incompatibility between policy 30 on tourism with local amenity requirements and policy VC2 in the local development plan. And then they also cite Circular 1/2023, which allows for a temporary use condition, and state that this could be applied. And I think they mention that it could be applied for 2 years if there was concern about amenity. So also to mention, the roads team had no concerns. They stated that the property is not within a controlled parking zone, although there are parking restrictions in some places to avoid unsafe parking, and there's on-street parking available, and also good public transport links. The waste team had no objection and stated that guests can use the residential bins until a commercial collection is established. And Ashley and Broomhill Community Council have no comments, and there are no representations. So at that point, I'll hand back to members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you very much. So we now consider we have sufficient information for us to take a decision on the application. If we do not feel we have enough.
Sorry, I can't hear you,
Sorry,
Kieran.
can't hear you, Kieran.
Try that now. There we go. I keep forgetting about this thing. So we're now to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members are reminded that if you do not feel you have sufficient information, we can request further written information to be provided, hearings to be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. At the moment, with the information in the pack and what's been provided by Ms Green, I'm happy to proceed, but we'll quickly go around the room. Councillor MacDonald.
Happy to proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Van Sweden.
Happy to proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Copeland.
Happy to proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Blick.
Happy to proceed.
That's great. As members feel we have sufficient information, we'll now pass back to Ms Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for the review.
Thank you. These are the relevant policies from National Planning Framework. And as we know, policies 1, 2 and 3 are relevant to all applications. Noting that the magnitude of impact would be relevant. Policy 7 seeks the preservation of the character of the conservation area, and Policy 12 seeks suitable management of refuse, while Policy 13 on sustainable transport states that developments should be accessible by public transport and active travel, and I'll cover Policy 30 on the next slide. So this is the tourism policy, which covers tourism-related development, stating that will take into account contributions to the local economy, the compatibility with the surrounding area, the impact on communities in terms of provision of homes and services for local people, opportunities for sustainable travel and management of parking, accessibility for disabled people, measures to minimise carbon, and opportunities to have access to the natural environment. And then in terms of residential amenity, development proposals for the reuse of existing buildings for short-term holiday letting will not be supported where there's an unacceptable impact on local amenity or the character of the neighbourhood or area, or the loss of residential accommodation where such loss is not outweighed by local economic benefits. So in terms of residential amenity, relevant considerations would be privacy and security, real and perceived, being disturbed by the use of the communal entrance by different groups of strangers, and the potential for large groups to use flats for parties with noise to other flats in the building. Local development plan policies, sites zoned within a residential area, and I'll cover that on the next slide. And similar to NPF 4, policy R5 seeks suitable management of refuse, with policy D6 also seeking to retain the character of conservation areas. Policy VC2 I'll cover in a moment, and then policies T2 and T3, similar to NPF 4, also state that development should be accessible by sustainable means of transport and have appropriate levels of parking. So policy H1 residential areas, as this is a non-residential use, it would be supported if it was considered complementary to residential use, and if it can be demonstrated that there would be no conflict or nuisance to the enjoyment of existing residential amenity. And then policy VC2 on tourism, proposals for new facilities capable of strengthening the attraction of Aberdeen to a range of visitors will be supported, but they should complement existing visitors attractions and be sequentially located in the city centre or on sites allocated for that use. And there is the short-term Let's Aberdeen planning guidance, which looks at a number of matters which are relevant considerations. And so those are whether the property is a flat and what floor the flat is on, the number of occupants, whether it would be used as a short-term let on a full-time or part-time basis, the parking arrangements, the anticipated turnover of guests, the length of stays, arrangements for waste, how many properties the STL would share an access with, and the communal areas that would be shared, and also the impact on the character of the surrounding area, including existing uses in the area. And the Scottish Government's publication on short-term lets highlights that they make an important contribution to the tourist economy because of the host's local knowledge, because they may offer accommodation in places not served by hotels and hostels. They may be more affordable, and also they may provide additional capacity around particular events. And then research findings that the most common positive impact is on the local economy. And also to note the circular, which refers to the policy and wider policy objectives, and also says that planning authorities may grant short-term lets for a limited period of time. So overall, the primacy of the development plan, as I said before, with all applications determined in accordance with the policies unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and each application treated on merits. So in this particular case, the basis for the decision would be, would there be harm to residential amenity of the neighbours? Is this an appropriate location for a short-term let? And the impact on the local economy. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan, or are there material considerations indicating otherwise? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, Lucy. Could you bring up the slide with the floor plan, please?
Yes.
Yeah, they've asked for 4 residents. And I want confirmation of the size of the bedrooms.
Yes.
This second one looks awful small.
I don't think that means, feet. They look pretty big on the photographs.
Yeah. I mean,
so
that one, according to this floor plan, it looks like it's 3 foot by 4 foot, which is a cupboard.
Yeah. I think they must be metres because they are quite large rooms when you look at the photographs.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I did wonder that.
That was the only comment I was asking. The other thing I see, it's already been operating for 2 years.
Yeah.
All right. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions, members? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. So, in accordance with procedural notes circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Determination, members. At this moment, I think with the current property operating for 2 years, there's been no complaints. There's been no complaints from the people who reside in the property following the neighbour notification list, including the person who lives directly below, that may be affected through amenity. I'm relatively comfortable at this stage to overturn the officers on this on regards of that amenity aspect. I'm happy that that's not really brought up here in terms of complaints from the residents with this property. Happy to go around the room and see what everyone else is minded. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much, convener. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, but I do wonder if we could put the 2-year window on it. The applicant was okay with that, just as a bit of comfort, just in case, if that was acceptable.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that as a condition. Councillor Van Sweden.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to disagree with you on this occasion, Councillor McRae. With policy 30, loss of residential accommodation, I don't see that it's outweighed by a demonstrable local economic benefit. So for that reason, I would not be supporting this application.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Blake.
Yes, I'm minded to agree with you, convener. I think it was notable that nobody, the neighbours below and other neighbours hadn't raised any objections around this. And I think the area is a good area for this type of accommodation, and it will have economic benefit to the restaurants and to the hotel, to the cafes that are round about.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blake. Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, I'm happy to grant this one. The fact that it's been operating for 2 years without complaints speaks volumes as far as I'm concerned on this. My only concern was the size of the bedrooms, but that seems to have been cleared up. So I'm happy to grant.
Thank you very much. Therefore, the local review body has agreed by majority to overturn the officer's recommendations on this one and approve the application. In terms of conditions, Ms Green, there's been a number of members who are content with the 2-year aspect of it. Are we happy to add that?
Yes, I can add that one.
And is there any other conditions that you wish to take forward at this time?
No, I wouldn't have any others to suggest.
That's great. Thank you very much. Therefore, decision notice will be sent out to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. Thank you. Turning to the consideration of the third review in respect of a decision to refuse the application for a change of use of amenity land to domestic garden ground, an erection of fence, gates and steps, which is all retrospective at 43 Middleton Circle, Aberdeen, planning reference 241224. Will again pass back to Ms Green, who will take us through the brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen again. Okay, yes, as noted, this is a review against refusal of an application for retrospective change of use of amenity land to a domestic garden and the erection of a fence, gate and steps. And the review has been submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit. The applicant notes that new matters have been raised within the submissions, and they have stated that they mentioned those new and additional matters as they didn't realise they were relevant previously. However, similar to the previous case, I would say that those are discussion of matters that were part of an ongoing discussion, and so don't count as new matters in terms of the local review body. In terms of procedure for conducting the review, the applicant expressed the view that a site visit should take place in order to fully understand the site's situation. But I'll provide some background information before handing back for members to decide how to proceed. So this is the location plan, and the area in question is this pink hatched area for the change of use. So the existing garden was the white area that relates to the house here. So the proposal is for, or the application is for the fence that extends around that area and for the change of use of the ground. And it is 63 square metres in size. So that's just taken from Google. I've got some photographs as well. And this is the area in question. Yeah. These are just taken from Google Maps from White Stripes Avenue. So the property is, I think that's the edge of the house there. So it's in here. I can't, I'm afraid, identify exactly which stretch the fence is theirs, but this is dated from 2021, and I understand the fence hadn't been moved at that point, so but the property is there. So that's the view from the street, from White Stripes Avenue at the side, and then that's just a bit further along where you can see the path going into the area from that street. That's to the south. So this is showing the fence, the fence that was there prior to the works taking place. So they're called existing elevations, but it means prior to the fence being erected. So that was the fence that was there before. You can see the lie of the land there. And then the proposed plans in terms of the application of the fence is obviously already there. So that was the old fence, and then this is the new fence that's been extended out. Because of the drop in levels, there's been a sort of deck installed there, platform, and that's the east elevation facing into the open space with a gate at this end. So I've got some photographs which show the new fence, which is the subject of the application. So you can see this is the south end of it, and that would have been the existing fence there, and the garage. And that's the gate just there. So looking from the north, you can see the path through the amenity space there, and then the fence, and there's been a shed erected in the area that's the subject of change of use as well. So the new fence would extend to something like there, but difficult to see behind the shrubs. And that's another photograph of the southwest corner of the fence. This is just because there's reference to ancient woodland inventory. So this is the maps of this are a bit off, but this blue is meant to be over the woodland belt there. If it should be slid across a bit, but it shows the shape of the ancient woodland inventory, and it's highlighted as long established and of plantation origin, which is defined here, shown on maps of 1750 or 1860, and continuously wooded since. So that's how it's defined. And that's from Nature's Scott website. Reasons for refusal, and the key points are loss of valued open space, green space network and ancient woodland inventory, part of the woodland between areas of housing, the new housing at Granham and the existing housing. The proposal's retrospective, and it's unclear which specific trees were lost when the area was cleared. There's conflict with policies NE2, which is green and blue infrastructure, policy 6 in NPF 4 on trees and woodland, policy 20 on green and blue infrastructure, and NE5 on trees and woodland. A further reason is that there is an irregular boundary which adversely affects the character of the area, and that conflicts with policies on design, quality homes, and the householder guide. A further point that if granted, the proposal would result in the permanent loss of ancient woodland, with domestic permitted development rights allowing for further development, and that would be to the detriment of biodiversity, the green space and the green space network, with no mitigation, and that the proposal conflicts with policies 1, 2 and 3 on climate change mitigation and biodiversity, and also policy 4 on natural places, and also that it would set a precedent. So the applicant's case, the statement includes photos of other properties allegedly showing the use of amenity space. They state that the amenity ground within the extended garden still serves as an environmental buffer and it's been enhanced through the works, and that the enhancement has involved removing hazardous vegetation and installing bat boxes and birdhouses, and that there is no negative impact. The applicant states they've communicated with the landowner and many others, and that there are no objections. They state that proposals comply with the policies cited. There's no harm to amenity, to biodiversity or the landscape, and with conditions attached, it would be a reasonable outcome if the application was approved. They state that the land was unmanaged with no trees or notable vegetation and is on the fringe of the wooded belt, and that the land was neglected with no clear ownership or public use. And over 4 years ago, the applicant erected the fence with the gate and steps so that they're immune from enforcement action. Also that the character of the land has been retained and it's a green buffer which is tended. And then further points from the applicant. The land had been previously disturbed when it was graded for the estate, and there's limited potential for regeneration. That the green space network function would be preserved with a well-used footpath running through the wider area which is unaffected. The fence line would be a minor irregularity and it wouldn't cause appreciable harm to visual amenity of the landscape character. And that the fence is 1.8 metres high, which is 2.3 metres including the platform. That there are numerous examples in Bridge of Don. Also that the fence and platform are timber, simple and high quality, and conditions could require dark staining or planting native shrubs. They state that there's no constraint to future maintenance of anything within the area in question. There are no drains or walls, etc. That the future maintenance of biodiversity measures could be conditioned that the habitat diversity was low prior to the works taking place. A condition could remove permitted development rights, that the development is climate neutral and small scale, and that there would be no precedent set as decisions are taken on the merits of the case. Also to note, there were no comments received from Bridge of Don Community Council. There was one objection, and that was on the basis that the proposal is not consistent with policy on green and blue infrastructure and the large increase to the footprint. So at that point, I will hand back to members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you very much. So we now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members remember that if you do not feel you have sufficient information to take a decision, we can request that further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. At this moment, I think I am content to proceed, given the information that has been provided from the screen and the pack, but I'm happy to go around the room and see how everyone else feels. Councillor MacDonald.
I'm happy to proceed, Convener.
Thank you very much. Councillor Van Sweden.
Happy to proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Blake.
Happy to proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Copeland. Neil says yes, go ahead in my ear. Right, so
I'll make it official. Go ahead.
thank you very much. So as members feel we have sufficient information to proceed, we'll now pass back to Ms. Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for the review.
Thanks. So relevant policies within national planning framework. As we know, policies 1, 2 and 3 are relevant to almost all applications, and they require that the decisions are made with significant weight being given to the climate crises, nature crisis and mitigation. Policy 4 protects and enhances natural heritage with support from Policy 6 in relation to trees. And Policy 14 relates to design, taking into account quality and context, and is similar to policies within the local development plan. And then Policy 16, in terms of existing housing, refers to protecting residential amenity. And I'll look at Policy 20 in a moment.
I'm not seeing any of the slides on the screen.
Sorry. Right. Let me... Right, I'll just go back to that list just briefly. So those were the policies that I mentioned. And Policy 4 on natural places. So that just states that proposals won't be accepted where they'll have an unacceptable impact on the natural environment due to their type, location or scale. And then Policy 6 on woodland seeks to protect and expand woodland and trees. And it seeks to enhance tree cover, stating that proposals won't be accepted where they result in loss of ancient woodlands, ancient and veteran trees, or have an adverse impact on their ecological condition, or have an impact on native woodlands, hedgerows, and individual trees of high biodiversity value. And then the third point is about fragmenting or severing woodland habitats. And then Policy 20 on blue and green infrastructure seeks to protect and enhance those infrastructures and their networks. And the point here that's relevant, I suppose, is communities benefiting from accessible, high quality blue, green and civic spaces, and the proposals that result in their fragmentation or net loss won't be supported, or will only be supported where it can be demonstrated that the proposal would not result in a deficit to the overall integrity of the network being maintained. The policies in the local development plan, many of which are quite similar to the ones in NPF4 in this case. The sites actually designated under Policy LR1 land release as part of Granham, although it acts as a woodland buffer and is identified as such in the development framework for Granham. But Policy H1 for residential areas is relevant because that also refers to new residential areas and has a reference to open space in it. So I'll cover that in a moment. But first, just to look at Policy NE2 green and blue infrastructure in the local development plan. So proposals will seek to protect and enhance the green space network, and the functions of that are for wildlife, biodiversity, ecosystems, access, recreation, landscape and townscape value. And development that does not achieve this will not be supported. And then the policy on trees and woodland proposals should seek to increase tree cover and not result in the loss of it. So as I mentioned, Policy H1 states that new development will not be approved, will only be improved where it does not result in the loss of valuable and valued areas of open space. and also it notes supplementary guidance. So in this case, the householder guide has a section on change of use of amenity space, where it states that changes of use should not fragment larger areas. They shouldn't result in the loss of visual amenity and features, and they shouldn't result in irregular boundaries that would be out of keeping with the area. And then policies on design in both the local development plan and at NPF4, and the 6 qualities there: healthy, pleasant, connected, distinctive, sustainable, and adaptable. And then finally, valuation in terms of policies in the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, with each application treated on merits. So the basis for this decision would be, would the proposals result in loss of valued open space? Would it fragment space, and would it preserve the green space network? And how would it affect the character and amenity of the area and the neighbours? And what about the impact on the ancient woodland inventory? Does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations that would indicate otherwise? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Just a few questions for myself. There's a mention that the current property owner has communicated with the landowner, but as then subsequently says that there's no clear ownership of the land. I'm just wondering if we can sort of clarify around that point to exactly who owns that land. Is it with the original Granham estate, or does it sit with ourselves?
I can only comment that it doesn't appear to be council owned, or the council's not maintaining it. I don't know who owns it, I'm afraid.
Okay. There's also a question in the supplementary review statement regarding the 4-year and the immunity of enforcement. Just want to get a wee clarification point around that aspect of it.
Yes, it seems to be that a fence was erected and then moved into place, I think in 2024, but definitely within the last 4 years. So the enforcement team are clear that it is not immune from enforcement action, neither the use nor the fence.
That's perfect. Thanks very much for clearing it up. We'll go around the room and see if we have any further questions.
Can I just ask around the paths that have been mentioned? So there was, I think, 2 paths. There was the path that seemed to come up to the gate that had been made in the back fence, new fence. How does that relate to the main path that was then referenced that people use more generally?
I'm just looking at the photograph again. I think that path is the main one that's used. The one in the photograph, and it goes through the area. I haven't found a line on any plan that I've looked at, and it's quite difficult to see it on overhead photographs because the trees are all in leaf when you try and look at them. But that path, let me just share it again, does appear to be the one that goes through the wider area. I think that is the path heading north and south.
Just coming in on that picture there, sorry Lucy to jump in here. We've got a tree that seems to have been managed, cut down.
Yes, that one. There is another photograph which I didn't put up because it's got people in it, and it shows it appears to have been blown down in a storm. It's you can see its roots in the photograph. So I don't think that was done. It's also north of the applicant's garden and area.
My other question, convener, was around the habitat diversity, which the applicant described as low. And I just wondered if there was any evidence to support either that assertion or any other knowledge of habitat diversity in the particular ancient woodland unmanaged space that exists there.
I don't think there's anything in the submissions formally talking about that, other than, you know, it's an ancient woodland, it's been there for a long time. It's shown the bat, there's an overlay of bat movements which shows that the bats would use the area. Yeah, I don't think there's anything formal that I've seen in the submissions.
Yeah, I would agree that I didn't see much there. And we saw the irregular boundary that was made by the fence sticking into the woodland for a space of a good few meters. Is there any other evidence of that boundary being made irregular along the way?
My understanding is that any other residents using areas outside their gardens haven't enclosed them. There may be evidence of them just using the areas, but they haven't enclosed them and made them part of the garden. So that would be the only section in this area that was irregular.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, members? Not seeing anyone else wanting to come in. I'm just checking over my shoulder. That's fine. Therefore, members, we will now move in accordance with the procedure note. The local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations related to the case have been considered and taken into account. I'm quite conflicted on this one. I would agree with the applicant that the space may not have been of down the lines of a valued open space, but it is still ancient woodland. I am concerned with, in relation to policy 20 and the householder guidance, in terms of the fragmentation of the land and the addition of the irregular boundaries around the site. I'm also concerned that there is no clear ownership of this area. I'm concerned that this applicant has therefore fenced off an area that does not necessarily belong to them in terms of land ownership, and therefore increased the curtilage of their property. But I'm happy to go around the room and see where others are minded on this one. Councillor MacDonald.
I tend to agree with you, I have to say. Not just it is that is it valuable or is it of value? Can it be used by others and rather than being fenced off for? I'm sure would be very good for the family who probably live in that home. I recognise that no trees were actually chopped down in the making of the putting up the fence, as stated. I'm sure that would be the case, but that doesn't mean that trees don't need some other space around them in order to exist, and they did exist before. So there is that irregular boundary, the precedent that as well. So I would be asking them to put it back. Oh,
Miss Green.
Sorry, just in terms of the ownership, the applicant did state that they'd been in contact with the landowner in their submissions. However, I'd just say that ownership's not a relevant consideration as well.
No problem. Councillor Van Sweden.
Yeah, I would support the refuse in this case, again, for the same reasons it conflicts with 1, 2, 3, 4 of NPF4, climate and nature crisis mitigation, biodiversity and natural places. So for that reason, I would support the refuse.
Thank you very much. Councillor Blake.
I would also refuse. I'm not conflicted about this one. I believe that with Councillor Van Sweden, I do think that it's against policy 20, and indeed it conflicts with NE 2, 6, 20, NE 5. I do think that this encourages a fragmentation, and though we may be thinking that this is not high quality, the biodiversity within it may actually be quite strong for some of the, it may not look managed by us, but nature will be using that space, and I do not think it's a precedent we wish to encourage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Copeland.
I think the officers got this right when they refused it. To me, this is basically a land grab. The applicant has implied that he contacted the owners, and at the same time he says ownership is unclear, and then he says anyway you can't do anything about it because he's been here for 4 years, which would tend to suggest that he just made a land grab and he thinks we can't do anything about it. Well, we can, and I think it would set a very dangerous precedent if we allow somebody to grab somebody else's ground and build on it to suit themselves. I also think that the biodiversity and ancient woodland things comes into play here, but we cannot simply allow somebody to just grab a bit of land and a bit of fence around it. So for that reason, I think the officers got it spot on when they refused this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Copeland, and of course we take Miss Green's advice on land ownership is not a material planning consideration, but we are considering everything else that the officers have raised, so therefore I'd be absolutely refusing any overturning of this. So therefore everyone's agreement, the local review body has therefore agreed to unanimously uphold the decision of the appointed officer, and the application is therefore refused. Thank you very much, members. That brings us to the close of today's meeting, and that all decision notices from today's meeting will be issued to applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.